meeting of Western Lane Ambulance District. Could I have a pledge of allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please, Holly?
Yes. Committee members, Jody O'Mara,
here.
RJ Pilcher,
Here.
Joel Marks,
Here.
Western Lane directors, Director Yesney,
Here.
Director Farnsworth,
Here.
Director Webb,
Here.
Director Murphy,
Here.
and Director Russell.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Holly. We do have a quorum. The next thing on our agenda is public comment, and the chief will coordinate that for us. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, John. So we received one written comment, and that will be entered into the public record for this meeting. And as of 3:30 today, we only had one person signed up to comment. That was Mr. Caven. Is there anybody else that would like to comment? We scheduled 30 minutes, and we only have the one person for 3 minutes. Okay. I think we'll go with Mike. Your 3 minutes will start as soon as you start talking.
All right, thank you. Again, my name is Mike Caven. I'm the president of the Lane Professional Firefighters Association, 160 Madison in Eugene. We're the local that represents the paramedics and EMTs at Western Lane Ambulance. And first thing I wanted to make sure that I thank you guys for your time. The board, budget committee, having served 8 years, I understand the challenges that you guys are faced with and working through the budget, making sure that you balance that, make sure the district's financially healthy. Our concerns started after the May 2014 budget committee meeting, where we saw some of the cuts that were being proposed in an open bargaining session proposed at the budget meeting and the public forum. And so we've been working to address some of that, trying to have communications and also providing some education around what we believe to be some misconceptions around the long-term PERS UAL debt. And I won't belabor a lot of that. The written comment that the chief mentioned is from me that will be in your packet tonight. More what I want to touch on is a lot of the support that we've been seeing from the community regarding our service, our paramedics and our EMTs. Some of the information or some of the rumors that I've heard was that there are conversations ongoing potentially with a private provider to take over the service. Obviously, we saw in a written comment provided to the joint board meeting last week that suggested that privatization be evaluated or a bid put out while contract negotiations were in process. And you'll hear that in that written statement I made where if that was an elected member of the board or an employee, that would actually be an illegal action. We want to work with the board. We want to work with the district. We have a long history in being creative and coming to the table and making sure that the service is sustained long-term at the high level of care our members provide to the Florence community. The community sees that. And so what we ask is that the budget committee recommend a budget that keeps things as intact as possible to allow us the opportunity to get with fire management and the elected officials and coming up with long-term solutions that make sure that our members continue to serve the Florence community at a high level for the time to come. Like I said, I really do appreciate your guys' time and your work and your support of our members working out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to comment? I don't hear anybody, John.
Okay, Chief. Before I have you do the budget summary one more time, I'm going to go around the group and let them comment. They might have a comment that you will address in the budget summary somehow.
You want to approve the minutes first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Approval of the minutes
Okay.
of the 5/14/2020 Western Lane Ambulance District Budget Committee meeting. I would
Yeah.
entertain a motion.
I so move.
And I'll
And you
second it.
are?
I am Joel.
Okay.
Director Russell seconds.
Chief?
We would like to propose an amendment to the minutes.
Okay, we'll do that. We got a first and a second. Now we have discussion. We can have an amendment.
So at the request of Director Yesney, we have added on page 3, the third bullet point from the bottom, that it was the consensus of the committee to move 300,000 for PERS from line 27, which had it as an expense, to move it to line 30 as a reserve fund balance. We just didn't have that it was a consensus of the committee. So we'd like to add that.
Okay. We have an amendment to the minutes. Joel, are you okay with that amendment sent in the minutes?
I have no problem with a friendly amendment.
Cindy,
No problem.
any other discussion or changes need to be made?
Yes, please.
Okay,
This is RJ Pilcher. On the 4th page, it states that RJ wanted to see Life Med money could be used to pay off PERS. That wasn't the discussion. What I was saying was that if the building fund was discontinued, that money should go to the unfunded PERS account. And Chief Schick did not reply to that. It was Director Webb who informed me that that money can still be used as building fund, but it can also be used for capital.
okay. It's like Holly's still writing, but looks like she's got them. Any other further changes to the minutes? If not, I'd like a roll call vote, please, Holly.
Okay. Director Yesney,
Yes.
Director Farnsworth,
Yes.
Director Webb,
Yes.
Director Murphy,
Yes.
Director Russell.
Yes.
Okay. Next is budget.
Did we get the rest of the budget committee?
Everybody, Holly.
You get the members, Holly, the committee members?
Okay,
Sorry.
sorry. Members Jody O'Mara,
Yes.
RJ Pilcher,
Yes.
and Joel Marks.
Yes.
Thank you. I understand you're only used to asking 5 of us, Holly. Next is the budget committee written comments. Did you receive any, Chief, from any of us?
And they're in the board packet. Yeah, we
Okay.
received comments from RJ Pilcher, Joel Marks, and John Murphy.
Okay, just those.
And I
Okay,
believe Director Farnsworth had sent you some.
right,
But we don't have those here.
okay. Before we start reviewing the document again for the few changes, I'd like to go around and get some comments. And Rick Yesney, I'd like to start with you.
Okay, thank you, President Murphy. I do have a few written comments here I'd like to submit for the record. First of all, I want to make clear, in my opinion, that Western Lane Ambulance District is currently in a very solid financial position. We're sitting on over $3 million in cash, and our financial statements for the first 10 months of this fiscal year show revenues exceeding expenditure by over $400,000. Our financial issues are not based on where we are today, but where we project we could be in the future, with expenses exceeding our revenue. Now, we've talked a lot about cost, but we haven't really talked about quality. And I've been on the Western Lane Ambulance Board now for over 3 years and have never heard one complaint about the service for our EMS team, but we've received many thank yous and praises from the community. I've also been connected with healthcare in the community for over 30 years, and during my time with Peace Harbor, have seen firsthand the synergy between our EMS team and our emergency department. It's really resulted in great care. And we've also gone beyond providing typical EMS services by adding the Mobile Integrated Health Program funded by Peace Health, which has drawn national attention. And we've also just been awarded a grant for the Mobile Crisis Response Team, which responds to those who are experiencing mental and behavioral crisis in our community. So this high level of service we provide is demanded by our community and is really an integral part of our amazing rural healthcare system in Western Lane County. Our healthcare system is a big driver for our economy in Western Lane County. It's one of the main reasons for our success in attracting retirees to the area. Our larger tertiary health centers in Eugene are an extension of our local healthcare systems for services that we're too small to provide, and our patients depend on our highly trained EMS team to be able to safely and expertly transfer them to a higher level of care. The bottom line is we have a first-class EMS system as part of an overall rural healthcare system here in Western Lane County. So in many ways, you get what you pay for. So after our last budget committee meeting, I did want to note I did go home, check my tax statement, and saw that for the operating levy, which is a major part of the taxes we pay to support Western Lane County, we pay $9.44 per month, which is less than I pay for a sleeve of 3 decent golf balls. The point is that you can't just look at cost, but of at least equal importance is the level of service that we provide to our patients. I believe this committee's job is to make sure that we have the resources available to provide the level of services envisioned by our board for our taxpayers for the coming year. The budget we've been presented currently meets that criteria and is a balanced budget. This budget does contain significant changes to payroll and benefits to balance the budget. I believe any fundamental changes to our operations, though, should be considered by both our community and those who are providing our services in a long-range strategic planning session that Director Murphy's brought up before and others in our board, I believe will want to undertake soon as possible. Fundamental changes to our financial or operating statements should not be undertaken with the haste through the budget process, which focuses only on 1 year. So we're looking at a 1-year operation. We need to look at a long-term plan. To the committee members, know that you've all been heard and have been anything but a rubber stamp committee. And I thank you for that and hope that you will all join us in updating our long-range strategic plan.
Are you muted?
However, we have before us a balanced budget that we need to pass so that the board continue its work for the community. And President, I just have one suggestion for the budget that I would propose as a change, and that is to take $150,000 from our unappropriated fund balance, line number 31, and move that to contingency line 30, increasing that contingency to $500,000. I think this coming year is going to be very unusual, and we have at least 2 very significant items whose financial impact that we can't currently identify. Labor negotiations where we don't know the outcome, and also the impact of the coronavirus in our district. It's really unknown at this time how those could impact our financials, so I'd recommend a slightly higher contingency fund moving out of unappropriated fund balance. Thank you for your time on that.
Thank you, Rick.
I have a quick question, John.
Yeah, just a minute. Let me one. Dina, Chief, or Holly, would you please keep track of the recommendations like Rick just gave, so we can go through them after everybody speaks?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joel.
Yes, I have a question for Rick. I'm following on the updated budget, and you were saying line 31. I have on line 29, 150,000. You were adding to line 30, 150,000 to make 350, 500,000. Where did you get that 150 from? Because line I have 1,383,106.
Yeah, it come from the unappropriated ending fund balance on line 31 would be reduced by 150,000.
Oh, you would reduce that and add it to line 30?
Right, and I'd move that to line 30 just to give us more flexibility because it's such an unusual year. And you notice that brings us down to about 1.5 million unappropriated fund balance, which is pretty much in line with the prior 2 years, 2 and 3 years actual plus the budget for last year.
So you're vying for a higher contingency fund
Correct.
To carry you over to, instead of 350, 500,000.
Yeah, just to give us some flexibility.
Thank you.
Mike Webb.
I would concur with Rick's change on that contingency. I think that's a good idea. Coming from the history of where we are on our budget, and I stated this the other night, but you get back to 2012 when we first went out for our operating levy, the district had 3 loans. Total amount was about $330,000. We had an ending fund balance of $1.4 million, and our call volume was 1,890. Presently, our call volume is close to 4,000. We have not increased our operating levy, and we have an ending fund balance that will come darn close to $3 million with no debt. If anything, we're not putting the money that the public has given us back to work in the district to support ambulance services. I think our ending fund balance is too high currently, and we need to be careful about how much we hold in reserve. That being said, we have an issue coming at us presently where our expenses, current expenses, are exceeding our revenue by about $150,000 per year. That's not sustainable. So we have to address and be careful with how we're looking at that going forward. But there's a multifaceted solution on that, and it's not something that you accomplish either through a labor contract or through 1 or 2 line items on a budget, unless it's an item we don't need to buy. So I think that's something that we should push into strategic planning and not consider within a budget committee, getting down into minutia of what needs to be removed or what does not. But we also need to think about the quality that we continue to provide, and remember that the voters are the ones who've given us the command by approving our levy and by approving us as a public entity to provide this service. And it's our job to make sure that the monies that they have given us are being spent to serve those services. If anything, we need to add staff, and we need to figure out a way that we can do that. With a call volume of 4,000, I don't see how we can reduce labor costs over time, or continue to reduce labor costs over time. I see we're going to continue to have higher and higher personnel services to meet the demand for our district. So with that, I yield the floor.
Cindy.
I agree with Rick, and I think our paramount consideration throughout all of this is to maintain the quality that we have with the service. To me, that's number 1.
Larry?
Before I give my remarks, could we have Chief share his graph?
Okay. I'd like to got all the remarks and just went into the budget summary.
I understand, but
I'll let.
This graph explains how, well, Chief, could you describe the graph to everyone?
Yeah, so what you're seeing are 2 lines. The red line are total expenses, and that's just assuming that previous expenses would increase at the same rate. So same increase in wages and benefits as we've seen over the last few years. Revenue, again, increasing as we've seen over the last few years. It's a little over 3% for tax revenue. Our transport revenue has been up and down over the years. This year has been a good year. Last year was a little bit lower, but we factored in a small increase for transport revenue. And that little tiny increase in revenue you saw last year, that was transferring funds from LifeMed to make up a deficit there. So as we see going forward, our revenue line is much lower than our expenses line. And so that's what we're trying to address in not only this budget, but future budgets and our labor negotiations.
Okay. Do you have any other graphs, Chief?
What would you like to see?
No, I think that's fine. I didn't want to cut you short.
No, that's it. Yeah.
So let me just give my thoughts. I really feel like it's difficult in the way that we operate. I certainly am sympathetic to Mike's letter that he shared with the board. And believe it or not, this board is very cognizant of all the issues that Mike so well described in terms of us having these different challenges in our budget, be it revenues, be it staffing, be it PERS. I think this board is very, very well informed. And any board member can tell you that I've been very, very passionate about PERS and wanting to make sure that the retirement security for our staff, those who have left and retired and those who are still with us, that be preserved. That being said, our intent has always been to discuss this with our paramedics and their represented union representatives at the table. It was not our intent ever to introduce these ideas or concepts. There were concerns that we had, and I want you to know that our side is committed to meeting at the bargaining table and talking about all of these economic issues, because we do see a looming problem with revenue and expenses. So we certainly do hope for a collaborative approach with our staff and with their union to solve these problems. That's always been our intent. And we do recognize the excellent service that our staff gives our community, no question about it. So these are conversations that we hope to have. We're looking for a collaborative approach. We're looking for shared solutions. Nobody here is trying to drive the truck off the cliff per se. We would very much like to solve these problems together, and we hope we can. In terms of the line item change that Director Yesney has suggested, I certainly concur. One of my early concerns about this budget cycle has been that there will be fallout for us in terms of our revenue, whether it comes from taxes or the delayed effect of reduced tax payments. We don't yet know what those impacts will be, and we hope that they are minimal. But even before COVID happened, this board had examined our expenses and revenue going forward, and we knew we had a problem even before COVID. COVID just brings it more urgently into focus for us as a board. In terms of the budget, what I'm looking for are some changes in the budget. I believe that the capital budget should be funded at the level required to maintain balanced funding. It's 186,000, I believe. I think that's a change that should be made to the budget. I consider the PERS set aside an expense. I don't care if it's above the line or below the line. I believe that those funds should be secured for retirement security for these folks that have worked for us. And so I don't like to look at it as a optional item. I've been advocating since I was elected to put money aside. I suggested $500,000 set aside because I believe we need to fill the gap on a $2.9 million unfunded actuarial liability. I feel very strongly about that. And so I look forward to a good process going forward. And I think that this board has expressed that we do value our staff and we do want to work with you. Thank you.
Jody?
I just appreciate everybody's comments. They've been very thought-provoking. I do agree with Rick moving the line item from 31 up to line 30. That seems, it gives a little more leeway with all the uncertainty. But other than that, I don't have any other comments.
Thank you. RJ?
Let me get unmuted here. I too am concerned about the PERS liability. Last year, when we were doing the budget, there was 150,000 in the budget from the previous year to go into that PERS unfunded liability. That never went into account, so that went into our beginning fund balance. Again, last year's budget that we're in right now, excuse me, our current budget, we have 150,000 in the budget for PERS UAL account. And there again, that has been rolled into beginning fund balance. This year, we're saying we want 300,000, and I'm not sure that it's ever going to go into an account. It was very specific last year that 150,000 was going to go into an account, and it's in beginning fund balance. So in actuary, there should be on the line for this year 600,000 going into that PERS unfunded liability account, because that is what the board passed in the last two budgets, and it's what is in this budget that we're looking at. So, you know, there's issues. Now, true, the ambulance district has money. It's in accounts that are dedicated accounts. And that doesn't, you know, I look at what's coming in and what's going out. And the budget that I see here is not a balanced budget. I did put comments in. I just think that we need to dig into it and get it taken care of. Thank you.
Joel.
Yes, I have just a couple of comments. So the district on the contingency now with 500,000 is suggesting approximately 10% contingency, correct? Is that, Rick, is that what you were wanting to do?
Well, you know, if you look at expenditures, it'd probably be closer to 15%.
Because that's a high contingency.
Pardon?
15% is high.
It is. It's what you can basically transfer without, I think, a supplemental budget.
Yeah, that's the
15%.
statutory maximum.
10.
I couldn't hear the comment.
15 is the statutory maximum.
Yeah, that's pretty high for contingency, but I understand that. But I guess my comments would be, you're asking budget members and the board from the community, some elected and some not. I used to be elected to different positions, but not in this community. To vote for a budget that is not balanced and to vote for a future that will not be balanced. And when Chief Schick put that chart up, I would assume that the revenues that you were projecting were revenues that would be more on the positive side or the more conservative side, not looking at revenues that may not come in.
That is correct.
So, and I would expect that. It is a very difficult lift. Now, I'm not a board member, I'm just a budget committee member. But it's a difficult thing to look at. I kind of agree with RJ on his comments. At some level, if the budget is not voted on tonight, if it was a 4-4 disagreement, I guess we have 8 people on now, right? If it was 4-4, the statutory limit for when you have to approve a budget is the 15th?
It is, no, it's the end of the month. We have to submit everything by July 15th.
You have to submit it by July 15th.
Yes.
Because the updated budget that I received, and I guess everybody received, the one page, wasn't all that different from some of the comments that I heard made the last meeting. And I understand that it would be difficult, but maybe the board has to figure that out a little bit better. anyway, that's kind of where I'm thinking. The PERS situation, I don't see how that's going to get any better. That's a very difficult thing that you have to deal with, and the more you put into that, the less you have for the district. But this is happening with every district. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Joel. Well, I do agree with everything that each and every one of you said. The PERS, the board will wrestle more with that in strategic planning. We've had several conversations how we want to move forward with funding the unfunded liability. There's different models we can use. The board is not done with those conversations. And I look at the budget personally this year, especially, it's a working, living document that we know will have to be changed when negotiations are done. Things will have to be moved around. And then strategic planning, we are going to start very shortly. There might want to be some things that we even change in the budget due to our strategic plan that we might feel is critical. And our employees will be a big part of that planning session and the community members. So we are going to head down the right path, and we will be funded correctly and still have the quality of service that we currently have. I truly believe that. Now, is there anything else besides Mr. Yesney's move for a line item that we really need to discuss in this budget?
I've got a curiosity, John. The amount that we're allocating for PERS, is that an opportunity fund where if the state opens up money that we can get the match fund? Is that what that's for? Or is it just, how is that to be used?
I think that would be a board decision, Mike. You know, and in the way I recollect our discussions, that we haven't decided that a side account is the way to go. If you make a side account to the state of Oregon, the money is out of our hands. It can't be used, and it does not reduce our unfunded liability. So I like the idea, Mike, of setting some aside wherever we put it, or name it in case we have some match money. But again, it's only a side account. It won't reduce our liability. So I don't know.
I'm trying to figure out the purpose of it. So that's something we should discuss, but I was trying to figure out the purpose of why we have that if we don't have the opportunity and we're not planning on putting it somewhere, because we're tying up money out of our general fund.
Can I make a recommendation, Mike, on that? Maybe that money is really, first of all, I wanted to have a check on what Committee Member Pilcher mentioned, that I believe the $150,000 was budgeted last year to be set aside in this current fiscal year. And the intent is that we're setting aside another $300,000 for a cumulative total of $450,000. And that money, I agree with RJ, it does need to be set aside in a separate account. But I think that was a budget approval for this current fiscal year, and we're adding another $350,000. And I think that gives us the ability, if there is a side account with the state that we deem to be advantageous, that we could take advantage of that. The other thing we could do is, if the PERS, we don't know what the PERS increases are, I think this almost creates a contingency fund to pay for PERS increases that, you know, it's like almost like a set aside specifically for PERS for future spending. So that's the way I would view it. It's not committed at this point to be spent, but it's set aside for opportunities that the board might want to take advantage of, or for future PERS payments that are above our normal budget.
Matt, may I comment?
I have the floor still. Well, let me just ask a question though. So we're taking today's dollars, which are for today's ambulance service, and setting it aside for a potential future expense that we don't know exactly what it's going to be. And if we took the $300,000 or $450,000 and paid the state against our $2.2 million PERS liability as of this year's audit, it wouldn't reduce that liability. So I'm not quite sure what we're actually gaining by that set aside. That's just my point. I'm not going to argue the set aside, but it's really not quite sure what we're gaining by it.
Larry?
First of all, I think the 2.2 million number is in dispute. It's been removed from our balance sheet. The point of the discussion has been that, unfortunately for everyone, the state keeps kicking the can down the road, and they have historically billed us for less than what we owed for the PERS liability we've carried as a district. But PERS has told us that that is not sustainable and that they will be asking us to make increased contributions to make up that deficit. So I agree with Director Yesney that yes, the intent has always been to put this money aside and use it for the betterment of our PERS liability in any way available to us. One might be the match that the state was offering that we didn't get. Number two would be our own investment account where we have those funds growing so that we can use them to protect ourselves from rapid increases in PERS actuarial payments. And third, maybe the state will someday give us the opportunity to make a direct payment against our PERS liability. We don't know how the legislature will move forward with that question, but we're unprepared because we don't have this liability even listed on our balance sheet. The entries in our last board meeting were reversed. We have no indication on our balance sheet that we owe this $2.9 million. And I feel like it's prudent for us to have these monies in a fund that's just like a building fund or a capital fund so that we have the funds so that we can remit them and balance out the liability. Now, I believe that RJ is correct. And I looked in the budget notes and I couldn't locate it, but we had agreed to put $150,000 in 2 years ago, but we decided to put that in just the general fund, that we were allocating it, but we didn't want to restrict how it could be used. So really it is 600,000. It's 150,000 for the year we're currently in, 300,000 for next year, and 150,000 was supposed to be set aside the year before. I think you all remember we had a conversation about PERS set-asides every single budget cycle, and we've been in office now for 3 years, some of us, at least I have. So I believe that Committee Member Pilcher is correct, that that money never ended up in a place where it could be identified for its use. Other than PERS, I would like to see the budget have a balanced line item for the capital budget. The capital budget requires 186,000. This budget shows 120. That's another way that this budget is not balanced. So I'm looking to see a fundamental change in that line item in this budget. I agree with Director Yesney. There's nothing wrong with putting more in contingency because we flat out don't know what the COVID impact might be. Thank you.
So are you saying, Larry, you want to take that $60-some thousand out of contingency and put it in capital?
Well, it should come somewhere from within our budget.
It has to come with somewhere.
Right.
Where would you like?
I'm thinking that if we look at where we have our revenues minus our expenses, one of those expenses is listed as capital outlay. So the 186,000 should come from revenues in order for this budget to be balanced. If we want to borrow from our future, again, by running our cash balances down, that's another way to do it. But this budget as presented is not.
I hear what you're saying and what you want to do. How do you want to fix it? Give me a solution.
I'd like to see somewhere in the budget $60,000 worth of cuts that would fund the capital outlay at 186,000.
Somewhere in the budget, meaning where?
I'd have to sit down with somebody and go over those. I don't have the detail in those line items. I'm just pointing out that this budget is not balanced. If you have a capital schedule that requires 186,000 a year and you only put 120 in, it's not balanced.
Well, the budget can be balanced and you have what I will use, for lack of better words, incorrect amounts in a line item, but the budget still is balanced.
Okay, that would be not my view. That would not be my
But
view.
that's okay. We can disagree.
Yeah. I guess it's 182,900 is the average need. And that's in today's dollars.
For the sake of the night, does the budget committee want to take money out of contingency and make the capital amount $186,000?
Yes.
No.
Got a yes? RJ?
You want a roll call vote, John, or?
I'll just take a consensus.
Okay.
RJ?
I think that we need to fully fund the capital outlay. I don't know that contingency is where it needs to come out of. There are other places that it can come out of.
Well, we have a capital reserve for quite a reason, and we have a very full capital reserve. In fact, our ending fund balance exceeds our cash needed to operate from July through November by quite a bit. So we really have a lot of taxpayer money that we should deploy rather than trying to hoard it. So I would use capital reserves for this. I wouldn't take a penny out of the budget.
I'm confused here because I believe we collapsed our building budget and into our capital budget, and both were declining balances.
We have some $800,000 in our capital reserve fund. What are we going to use it for other than to purchase equipment? We could build another building, but we're not going to maintain a building with a capital reserve fund because it's for purchases of capital. It's not for maintenance. So we've set this money aside for capital purchases. Why are we holding it if we're not going to use it?
Well, I just don't
That's
think.
my point. We have the money. There's
Right.
no reason to rob the budget from operating for the benefit of the people in the district right now, to take money out of serving them when we already have money in savings.
Excuse me, can I ask a question about that? So you have right now a contingency of 500,000, and then you have a capital reserve contingency of 800,000?
We have a capital reserve fund in excess of $800,000. That's out. You don't see that in the budget right before you.
No, I can't. I wouldn't be able to determine that from the budget that I've been given. So you could
It's not on this page.
You could theoretically then take that out of the capital reserve fund.
Exactly.
That's on page 18 of the board packet.
Is it on 18 or 19?
It says 18, but
It's page 18 and it could be 19, depending on how you look at it. So what Director Webb is pointing out is that under the first column, it says 837,000. And then each year that balance decreases all the way down to 319,000. So the question is, what's the minimum? Is this just a declining slope to zero? Or are
personally, most districts, and I hate to sound like a banker, but most districts will finance their capital purchases because the capital that they purchase generates revenue over time. When you invest in something, financing it actually makes sense because the turn that you get from an active ambulance helps pay for that bill.
Right. May I make a suggestion then that might be helpful? If we as a district decide that we will never go below $500,000 because sometimes you will have capital needs that surprise you. Maybe what needs to be done is the capital budget needs to be funded so that this slope here never goes below 500,000.
That $500,000 figure is not a budget committee determination. That's a policy decision on the board.
I agree, but what I'm advocating is it looks like a declining balance and I have nothing else to base it on.
But it should be a declining balance. We have too much in that fund. We should use it. if we're gonna buy something, we should use it from that fund. That's what the fund was built for.
Right. And I also feel like we should have kept our building fund because our existing building will need upgrades. It will need another garage to store an ambulance. It'll probably need an expansion of living quarters and operations areas.
Well,
So
we just
even if-
did that.
I know that, but we're talking over a 10-year period of time. You know, if we never plan for the future with a building fund, we won't have it and we will have to use debt.
Well, we have the property to sell that we can use if we need to add on to the building.
That's true. That's an asset that the district holds. That's true.
Right.
But we also have to remember that we have today's tax dollars that are to be used for today's services. This is the whole purpose of this. And if we carry more cash than say 6 months worth of reserve, then we're really not doing a service to the taxpayer. We have to get that money deployed. And right now our balances are beyond, in that area, are beyond where they're supposed to be. You could fund the short-term debt. We could move money out of capital and fund the short-term gap that we might have in our operating fund. I don't recommend that, but that's something we could do. But
Well,
right now, we have more money than we need to. We don't need to have this much money.
I agree, and that's a conversation maybe for another day, but my view is there should be a substantial amount of fund in a building fund and a capital fund, especially when your ambulances are 200,000 each. You need to have a certain floor that you look at as a prudent business model. I'm not an advocate of spending it because we have it.
Well, we actually had that discussion last time at the last meeting, and I think the floor we were talking about,
right,
it was in the 300,000 range. So the chief, that's the slope the chief has actually put into the capital fund. If you look at his 10-year schedule for equipment purchases.
Right. It's a declining balance every year.
Correct. And he gets down to the $300,000 level, which is still, that's enough to buy an ambulance and a half and go from there.
Okay.
So I have a question. Last year when we got rid of the building fund, we talked about the fact that it would be put in capital replacement and used at the ending fund to help fund all the capital replacement needs through all the way through to 28, 29 year. And I remember that. I don't remember whether or not the 319 was the lowest we were going to go, but like John said, that's a policy decision. But I think it makes more sense to take the money from capital reserves to backfill the capital reserve budget to make it balanced rather than taking it out of contingency, because that's what it's there for.
I agree with Jody.
Yep. At least let's do that this year so we can get that $186,000 in there. We all okay with that?
Well, now she is talking about purchasing the equipment out of the capital fund, correct? So
Yeah.
So the 186.
I think what they're trying, what Larry is trying to do, Mike, is the chief give us a yearly amount we need to spend on capital outlay to keep our equipment up to snuff and up to date. And Larry's wanting to put away that $186,000 every year shown in the budget to meet the chief's schedule. Is that right, Larry?
Well, it is, because I anticipate that Matt's done a great job on this schedule, but I anticipate that there will be other things that come up that we'll need to spend capital monies on. And I can't imagine that we'd go 10 years without building another garage at the ambulance building. I think these things will cost money. And so we have seen as a board unanticipated expenses for IT. We've seen unanticipated expenses for lots of things. So I'm saying a prudent way to manage this would be to put away what's required in this schedule so that we are prepared for that rainy day when we decide, okay, enough is enough. We have more ambulances than parking places. Let's build another garage. Or if we need more dorms, or if we need some other need will come up in these 10 years that's not on this schedule. So I like the idea of having a building fund. I like the idea of having a capital fund, but between the two, I want to fund them at the level shown on this chart.
Well, let me back up though. What Jody suggested, if I understand correctly, is to cover the gap for the purchases projected this coming year from the capital reserve fund. Did I get that right?
Into the capital outlay, yes.
Into
That
the
one,
capital
rather than
outlay.
take it out of contingency or any other fund.
So not feed the capital reserve fund with an increased amount, but rather pay for that coverage out of capital reserve. Pay for the shortage.
Because there will always be an amount put into that capital outlay, and it may not always be more than it may not always be less than what's budgeted for. But if we're able to backfill that this year, that doesn't mean we're going to have to necessarily do it next year.
Okay.
Are we going to vote? Do you need an amendment for that?
No, we can just consensus if that's what you guys want to do.
I agree with what Jody is bringing up, and Mike has talked about that before too a little bit. So I agree with that approach.
Could you summarize the recommendation, or do we have a motion on the floor? Need to change it? I'm a little confused.
We don't have a motion. I'm just looking for a consensus to put the $186,000 in capital replacement and have it, we're 60-some thousand dollars
Right.
short there, that we take that 60-some thousand dollars out of capital reserve.
Which I think is consistent with the budget as written, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Mike?
No, we had dropped it to 120,000. Now we're anticipating capital purchases next year of 225,000. That 186 was an average over the 10 years.
So, but if I'm reading it right, the 120,000 that we're planning on putting in reserve fund is not meeting the total amount we're purchasing. So the coverage, the additional will come out of our capital reserve fund as budgeted.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
RJ?
I was just going to kind of say the same thing that Mike was, is that basically it would be a status quo with what's there at 120,000. And I still feel that we need to fully fund it. And I think it should be at 195,000 to be able to meet extended obligations.
So what do you folks want to use as a placeholder? Because we might spend more, we might spend less, depending on the needs. And if we spend less, we can put it back in the capital reserve fund. If we spend more, we take it out of the capital reserve fund. What is the consensus for a placeholder in the budget?
Sounds like 186,000 is what has come up. RJ wants 195, so whatever the figure is that the committee comes up with, I think you should take it out of the capital reserve fund.
So there's $75,000 difference between what's budgeted, what's in the expenditures for capital outlay, and what is revenue, and then what's the difference? It's 75,000. So I would think you would take 75,000 from the capital reserve fund, add that into capital outlay, and then if there's more to take out, then that could be used, contingency could be used for that, or capital reserve funds could be used for that. If it's over that, you have that flexibility.
Matt, do you anticipate that we're going to need everything that is shown on that schedule of the years in the Chiefs at 220,000 next year?
There we go. Chief and I looked at that really hard and worked together. That those are the best forecasts that we have, and taking into factor mileage and how often we're using ambulances and recycling through thankfully our cheapest ambulance is actually our transfer ambulances, and those are actually incidentally our highest frequent use because of the mileage we put on them. So the 10-year outlay that we have in the budget, I would say is a very fair projection for the next 10 years.
Okay, then let's use the $220,000 figure.
So you want to change capital outlay to 225?
Whatever your chart, whatever your
So,
spreadsheet tells us.
so I think one thing is the difference between the 225 and the 195, if that's the issue, is the district MIH car, which is probably covered by the Peace Health grant.
That is
So in
correct.
other words, there's another source of revenue for the $30,000 MIH car. And that money, Chief, I don't know if you want to announce it now, so we might as well get it out of the way, has already been received by the district, the MIH program.
That is correct. Peace Harbor is working on press release and announcement, but yeah, we've been funded for the next 2 years for our MIH program.
Right.
So Rick, what do you recommend we put in for capital?
Well, so I'll just be really honest. I agree with Director Webb. I think we have excess capital in this fund. I also agree. I think we need some kind of study on our building, and because I'm hearing, and I think that's correct.
Wait, we're getting into strategic planning.
I agree. I'm just saying.
I'm trying to figure out a line item to put in for a placeholder.
Okay. So if you want to cut to the quick, I would stick with the budget as proposed and transfer 120,000 into the capital replacement fund and use part of the and spend it as budgeted.
RJ.
I think Director Yesney was trying to answer my suggestion, which was I still feel we need a building fund.
Well, I think we need at least need it incorporated into the capital replacements.
Mm-hmm.
RJ.
Did we ever look at that contract with Peace Health and find out what the time frame is for that grant? Is it from last January for 2 years? Is it from right now for 2 years?
It was a 2.5-year agreement ending June 30th of 2020, for which they were going to pay us $200,000, and that's what occurred.
So the $50,000 that was still in our budget was a mistake.
I believe so.
So we're leaving 120,000 in capital reserve because it sounds like you folks have moved on. Now I'm going to take you on to the WFIA budget next. We have to decide which number we are going to use to put in our budget to get a total budget figure amount. Rick Yesney, got a recommendation there for us?
Well, again, as I noted earlier, I'm really okay with the budget the way it is right now. WFIA is having a board meeting on Monday. I'm kind of torn on this one. I don't have another suggestion. I'm okay passing it now, but addressing the issue through the WFIA board.
I understand that we have 2 proposed budgets for WFIA in our budget document.
I would take what's in our budget currently, which is budget number 1. But I think the issue needs to be discussed at the WFIA board level.
So you're okay adopting a budget that gives WFIA raises and benefits at the current level and not for the rest of Western Lane Ambulance District employees?
Yeah, I'm okay leaving it like it is, subject to discussion with WFIA.
RJ?
On WFIA, I think that we need to go with budget number 2, with the exception of line 3, which is fire ops chief training, and reduce that to $75,000. The EMS district has a trainer, and there's no reason for us to be paying half of the fire trainer. So that would bring that figure down to $767,788 on that page.
I am not in favor, like I've stated before, and all the documentation is not the budget committee's responsibility to determine staffing level or pay scales.
That's not what I was doing. I was saying that it is overfunded, and it's our job to take a look at the numbers.
RJ, what page are you on right there?
Page 22 or page 21 is the WLAD Personnel Services.
Joel, it's under tab 8, second page.
Again, the tabs are covered up by the numbers.
So may I comment?
Yes.
I believe we should stick with proposed budget number 2. Point of information, when the 2 Western Lane ambulance directors go to the WFIA board, if there's a split vote, the measure would pass if the other 2 on the other side vote for it. And my point is that really needs to be decided by this group here, and the 2 WFIA board members take that message forward. Yes, it's awkward. We should have had the WFIA budget meeting before this one, but I believe that if we're trying to solve a cost problem in our district, half of that WFIA situation is part of our responsibility. So I believe we should stick with budget number 2. And if that doesn't happen, we'll have to deal with that after the fact. But I think it's fair that if sacrifices are being made, that they be made across the board.
Mike Webb, you got thoughts on them 1 or 2?
I'm good with budget 1.
Cindy?
Budget 2.
Jody?
What, if I remember right, the proposed budget that we were being asked to approve was budget 1.
Correct.
Budget 2.
Joel?
That's what I agree with, budget 2.
I got 5 number 2s, guys. So we'll put number 2 in the budget.
So John, since that's going to be discussed by a WLFIA board and going forward, could you put the difference between budget 1 and budget 2 in contingency to cover anything that the WLFIA board may come up with somewhere in the middle, if they do come up with something in the middle?
That doesn't mean Western Lane Ambulance is going to agree to it.
Right, this is a recommendation.
Correct.
But I think that Director Yesney and I are obligated to follow the directions of this group when we meet with
Absolutely, but that applies to the SVFR board as well. So
sure,
there has to be some consensus. And it may be in the middle, or maybe I have no idea what the board is going to come up with, but there could be an additional expenditure.
Then I guess we'd have to get together as a board once again.
So,
If there is an additional expenditure, we have the right to change this recommendation budget at the board level.
so Director Murphy, where would we put the difference then? I mean, Chief Schick has suggested that change might go to contingency. Where are we proposing to put the difference in the budget? Would it just be end on the unappropriated fund balance, or where does
What do
it
you
go?
think?
I don't know. I don't know.
We don't have a line item to budget it in. So it would just have to come out of unappropriated ending fund balance or contingency line item.
I agree. But I think we should be using budget number 2 in this budget. That helps balance this budget, the district budget.
Right, but you're going to be out of balance by this change. It's got to go like into unappropriated ending fund balance or something, or contingency.
And that's what, 51.5? So if we added 51.5 into a contingency for WLFIA negotiations between WLFIA Board and Sisal Valley, I think that would be a way to mitigate that. So you just, we're making a statement that we want the lower amount, but we allocate some portion within our budget to cover our requirement if we have to negotiate it up.
And
I don't see another way to do it. I just put it into the contingency. This is the wackiness with WLFIA.
I agree, Mike Webb.
I agree with Mike too. And, you know, I heard that the other board approved both budgets, and whatever result occurred would be fair across the board for staff and administration. So
That's not correct. They only approved one budget.
Okay, well, that's not what they tell me.
I'm not sure why they would tell you 2 budgets. They only approved one budget.
So back on track, guys. Is everybody okay with Mike Webb's recommendation?
Can you restate, please?
Yes. Contingency?
Yeah, I would put the split difference, what is it, 51.5, or maybe our portion is 52 or 53.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Put that into the contingency as a separate carve out or a possibility. So right now, increase contingency by that amount, subject to or I think unappropriated ending fund balance, it would be the wrong place to put it. We can't move it from there.
Yeah,
you're right.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Do we need a motion?
John?
Yeah, I was looking for our total budget figure.
I think RJ has a question.
RJ?
Okay, so the difference to us is around $51,000. The difference between revenues and expenditures in our current budget is $249,712 once we move the $300,000 out of current expenditures. That 51,000 actually balances the books. So it should just be taken out of material services operations, and that would take care of our issue.
Well, I think it'll work out, RJ, if you put it in contingency, because we could use that, deploy that into material services. If I figure right, the dollar amount would be $52,234. That's 51% of the difference. So that would be the amount to increase contingency. And then if the lower budget is the one that's ends up being adopted, we can move that 52 and change into our general fund to cover some of those other expenses or to balance that budget.
Well, RJ's point is well made. The budget that was presented last time was out of balance by $51,000 plus the difference in the capital account. So what he's suggesting is that the $50,000 solves that problem. I concur with RJ.
But
You have to work from contingency though. You can't make the line item changes in the budget now. And then move
but we're talking apples to oranges. The budget that was presented to us last time, total dollars, the budget balanced. You're talking about what did not balance or equal out was our revenue versus expenditures, but they presented us a balanced budget. By using budget number 1 with WFIA, which is currently in our budget that is being presented, the total budget dollars does not change. If we go to number 2, we just move the excess to contingency, but our total dollars in the budget stays the same.
Correct.
So is that concurrence on that issue?
I would vote against it.
So what?
As far as where it's going to go, then it should go into unappropriated ending fund balance.
But then if it's in an unappropriated ending fund balance and we get hit with a higher expense, we can't get to it. That the ending fund balance when it's unappropriated is ending fund balance. We don't have the ability to move that within our budget. That's the whole point of contingency. It's the funkiness of government accounting, but that's a true reserve fund.
It seems pretty academic to me because the board can make changes of 10%. And we'd probably have to make a change depending on what the outcome is one way or another. It's just more elegant, in my opinion, that we've all selected budget number 2, that be used in this budget. Why build a budget around something that doesn't have concurrence? I mean, we have
Larry, I think we had the consensus to use number 2. They were discussing where they were going to put the excess that was in the budget from number 1 is all we're trying to figure out.
Okay.
Because the total dollars in the budget is going to stay the same. And I'm looking for that number, Dina or the chief or Matt, do you have that? So it can be put into the motion to vote on?
Well, the number for the motion is still going to be the bottom number. Like you said, it's the 5.819220. That's the dollar amount of
that's what I was looking for. What is that?
$5,819 or $819,220.
$5,819,220.
Yes.
The motion to make that is on the agenda page at the bottom. I would entertain a motion, please.
I move that we approve the proposed budget for the 2020-21 fiscal year in the amount of $5,819,220.
I'll second that.
And who did second it?
Mike.
Mike. Have a first and a second. Any discussion on that motion?
It's not
RJ?
818, it's 819. 5,819 is what you're voting on, not 818.
$5,819,220,000.
Yeah.
And that is with the changes that were discussed previously by changing the Director Yesney's idea to change the 150 from unappropriated ending fund balance to contingency.
Yes. RJ, I seen your hand up.
Yes. If I'm correct with what Chief Schick said, the MIH program, we are getting $200,000 for 2.5 years.
That's what we did receive for the last 2.5 years.
So what are we getting now?
Starting July 1, 2020, they're paying us $250,000 for the next 2 years.
Okay.
Did you, Chief, say that we already got that money?
For the next 2 years, we did.
We did. Okay, so they paid us in advance.
I have, Larry, I have a motion on the floor.
Mhm.
Do you have any discussion on the motion that was made?
I have a question.
Okay,
Does that 250,000 that Chief Schick just talked about for the next 2 years, is that indicated in this budget?
Yeah, that covers the MIH program.
It'd be line 6, Joel, on the under
summary.
revenue summary. There's 125,000 for grant income for mobile integrated health.
Tab 2.
Oh, I see. I see it.
Yeah, that's such a great deal.
Holly, could I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Director Yesney,
Yes.
Director Russell,
Yes.
Director Farnsworth,
No,
Director Webb,
Yes.
Director Murphy.
Yes.
All right. Committee members, Jody O'Mara,
Yes.
RJ Pilcher,
No.
Joel Marks.
No.
Motion does carry. Now I would entertain a motion to approve the permanent tax rate.
I so move.
Would you read the motion for the record, please?
Motion to approve the permanent tax rate of 0.3196 per thousand of assessed value and the local option levy tax rate of 0.45 per thousand of assessed value.
This Director Yesney, I'll second.
Have a first and a second. Any discussion on the tax rate? Hearing none. Holly, could I have a roll call vote, please?
Director Yesney,
Yes.
Director Russell,
Yes.
Director Farnsworth,
yes.
Director Webb,
Yes.
Director Murphy.
Yes.
Committee members, Jody O'Mara,
Yes.
RJ Pilcher,
No.
Joel Marks.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. I will now adjourn the meeting.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.